Hey, Creative Christian, Jeremy here with another day of Author 2.0 Insights, which I think is what I'm going to start calling these videos. I know I had talked about Motivation 365 or something along those lines as I sort of get into the swing of these regular videos that I hope to offer you as a way to empower your own creative Christian author journey. But as I started thinking about the kinds of videos that I wanted to post, I realized that it was beyond simply motivation. And instead, I really want to pass along some of the insights that I've learned in my own author journey the last 10, 15 years, sort of being on the inside of the Christian publishing world, both as a contracted editor, content creator, marketer for a bunch of big-time Christian publishers and some smaller ones as well as being a contracted author for some books. I wanted to instead pass along to you some of the insights that I've learned as that sort of insider in the publishing world, as well as an independent creator as the head of my own publishing company, Emmaus Way Media Group. And so I think moving forward, we're going to shift a bit beyond just motivation and into insights and inspiration to help your own author journey. Along those lines, the last few days, several days, have been mostly on the motivation side, the mindset side, how we should think about and consider our approach to writing and the creative endeavor, especially from a biblical standpoint. Today, I want to take the insights in a different direction, beyond just inspiration, and instead focus in on more of the business side of being an author, especially an author entrepreneur, in the way that I myself have taken on that sort of identity and mantle in the last decade as an independent creator. Because, frankly, that is where the modern publishing world is heading. Beyond the sort of gatekeepery, corporate publishing, big publishing structure, and instead empowering independent creators like you, average people, pastors, other professionals, creative people who have stories to tell, devotionals to write, resources and other insights and studies that need to be connected to the world beyond the individual storyteller, resource creator. And in seeking to empower people like you, there is part of that author journey that needs to be dealt with at the front end. And that is the business side of being an author. I don't mean the taxes and the revenue and the sales and whatnot. I mean getting into the mindset of treating this beyond just a hobby and instead as an entrepreneurial endeavor, as a sort of business, whether an incorporated business or a doing business as under your own sort of sole proprietorship, which is sort of what I do with my own limited liability corporation. And so in thinking about you as an author who wants to treat this as something more than just a hobby, something you do on the weekends or the nights, but something that is more intentional and more deliberate with your storytelling and resource creation. That's what I want to focus on today and the next few days in getting into the business mindset of what it means to be an author in this modern publishing world. And one of the best sort of models that I have myself looked to when it comes to this modern publishing world is a guy by the name of Dean Wesley Smith. Not as well-known big-time author as like a Stephen King or Nora Roberts or James Patterson or Clive Cussler, but Dean Wesley Smith is one of the more prolific modern publishing authors nowadays. He has his own independent publishing company, but for decades he worked for the big publishers, writing mostly media books as one of the primary writers for the Star Trek novels, Men in Black novels, Star Wars novels, along with his wife, Christine Catherine Rush. Now, I will be honest, these are not Christians or believers, and both would say that, honestly. Dean has himself. So I'm not betraying anything there. And so when I say that at the front end, because for me as a model, there are certain parts of them that I sort of just ignore and instead follow their more practical business advice, which I have taken to heart the last probably 10 years that I have had the pleasure of sitting under them as somewhat mentors and teachers in a lot of the workshops and courses that I have taken from them, but also some of the insights I've gleaned working alongside, especially Dean, in some projects that I've had the privilege of working with him on. And one of the big insights that he has given, especially independent creators, are a set of business rules that he has followed the last 40, 50 years himself, which has allowed him to write so many books and to become a pretty successful author, entrepreneur, a business owner, and an author of more than 100 books for some major entertainment anchors in our popular culture. And so I wanted to share those business rules that he has passed along to independent creators like me and others for several years now. And they are rules from another generation ago that still, I think, apply directly to this modern publishing world. They are rules that are known as he calls them, Heinlein's rules, named after Robert Heinlein, probably one of the premier science fiction pulp writers back in the day. Not all that well known, at least to me, but to some people, some generations, he was like the rock star of hard science fiction. Some even call him the dean of science fiction, specifically the hard science fiction. You might have seen actually the movie Starship Troopers, which is one of his more well-known books that was turned into a film. But until I dialed into Dean and until he shared these rules with me and others, I had never heard of Robert Heinlein. But the rules are pretty interesting, and they seem very simple on the front end and on the surface, but when you dig deeper into those rules, they're also super insightful and incredibly wise, but also really hard to follow, which I think is why he wasn't afraid to give the racket away, as he says, in the original publication in which these rules are sort of outlined. Because he recognized how difficult they were to follow, and that most writers, especially long-term professional writers, just wouldn't follow them. And in not following these rules, quote unquote, I put the rules in air quotes because I think when it comes to writing, there are very few hard and fast rules when it comes to this business. But these ones, I think, are in a different stratosphere that you as an independent creator should look to and take advice from when it comes to your own career. So let's get to those rules, because I think they're going to be helpful, and I think they're going to give you some aha and maybe moments as we walk through these the next few days. I want to go back to when these rules were first written and given and explored by Robert in a book of writerly advice called Of Worlds Beyond, the Science of Science Fiction Writing. The subtitle there, The Science of Science Fiction Writing, in this big book of edited works by some of the major heavy hitters. Bradbury, E.E. Doc Smith, Sprague de Camp, Robert Heinlein was again one of those contributors to this edited volume. Some of the major heavy hitters of the science fiction writers during this heyday of the pulp era in the 40s, 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s. 1947 is when this edited volume came out of Worlds Beyond. And Robert was one of these contributors. He contributed an article, and most of it isn't all that relevant to what I want to talk about today in the next few days. But the last 4 paragraphs, and especially this chunk, this excerpt from his article, is super interesting and super insightful. Take a listen. This is what he says in sort of the last few paragraphs of his article. He says, "I'm told that these articles are supposed to be some use to the reader. I have a guilty feeling that all of the above may have been more for my amusement than for your edification. Therefore, I shall chuck in as a bonus a group of practical tested rules, which, if followed meticulously, will prove rewarding to any writer." All right, so here are these business habits, which Dean Wesley Smith calls Heinlein's rules for the business side of writing, but I think can also be applied to the writing side of writing, which we'll get to. Here are those 5 habits, those rules. First, number 1, you must write. Rule number 2, you must finish what you write. Number 3, you must refrain from rewriting except to editorial order or editorial demand. Number 4, you must put it on the market. Number 5, you must keep it on the market until sold. 5 business habits, business rules for, I think, any writer, especially independent writers like you nowadays in this modern publishing world. Let me read those again. He says, Rule 1, you must write. Rule number 2, you must finish what you write. Number 3, you must not rewrite except to editorial demand. Number 4, you must put it on the market. And number 5, you must keep it on the market. 5 simple rules, more air quotes, that any writer would benefit from, I think, keeping in mind when they approach the business side of writing. He ends this article in this way. He writes, "The above 5 rules really have more to do with how to write speculative fiction than anything said above them. But they are amazingly hard to follow, which is why there are so few professional writers and so many aspirants. And which is why I am not afraid to give away the racket." I love that. And I think that's what Dean Wesley Smith, when he first encountered these business rules almost 50 years ago, they totally revolutionized his approach to writing and especially publishing. At the time, he was a poet and then really wanted to get into short story writing and novel writing. But it took him 7 years of trying and failing at becoming a full-time professional writer until he found these rules, and then January 1st, 1982, he made a resolution with himself to write a story per week and to follow Heinlein's rules, to execute every one of these in order to benefit his own author writing career, his publishing career. Here are those rules again. You must write, you must finish what you write, you must not rewrite, you must put it on the market, and you must keep it on the market. 5 rules, which I think Heinlein's correct in saying that these really separate the professionals from the aspirants, as he calls them, the people aspiring to be writers, to be even full-time professional writers. Lots of people want to write that great American novel, right? Lots of people want to write stories. Lots of people want to write books. But at the end of the day, it's these 5 rules which really separate the professionals, the pros, from the aspirants, those talking about it, and instead jumping on the writer pony and following it down the road to the end, the completed story, the completed resource, and then putting it on the market to connect that story, that study, that devotional, that resource that will help people deal with anxiety or parenting. These are the rules that are going to empower you to do just that, to finish your passion project, to publish it, and to connect that project to people who need it. I'm going to have more to say in the coming days on each of these rules, but for now, I want you to think about them and to think about your own relationship to these rules. Where are you succeeding and where are you falling down? Here they are again. You must write. You must finish what you write. You must not rewrite unless to editorial demand. You must put it on the market. In other words, publish it. And then number 5, you must leave it on the market. Keep it there so that readers can find it and connect to it. And in the Christian sense, which is what my passion is, with this community, Cross and Pen, so that people's faith is ignited by encountering your story study resource. All right, think about these rules, and in the meantime, before we unpack them all, go create in Christ.